Hello everybody, this week we're going to be looking at information text in English, and this is an example of one about the Great Fire of London. Okay, so it starts off with kind of an introduction about the kind of key facts. So over 300 years ago, at the time of the Great Fire of London, there was no fire brigade. Local people kept buckets and ladders ready in case of fire. There were water pipes under some roads. They were made of wood. Some churches had pumps to pump water from the river. The pumps were powered by hand. For big fires, people used axes and ropes to pull down houses. This stopped the fire spreading. At the time of the Great Fire, buildings were made of wood and had thatched roofs. In London, they were built very close together. The upper floors jutted out so that houses on opposite sides of the street nearly touched one another. There's an example of that, one of the features there, a picture showing one of the houses. Open fires were used for cooking and heating. Candles or rushlights were used for lighting. And then we get into one of our other features of information text, is a subheading. So how the Great Fire started. Thomas Fariner was King Charles II's baker. He lived over the bakery in a narrow street called Pudding Lane. And we can see here a map of London at the time, and Pudding Lane is labelled on this old map. On the night of Saturday the 1st of September 1666, Thomas did not put out the fire in one of his ovens. By 1 o'clock in the morning, the house was on fire. The family escaped by climbing over the rooftops, but sadly the maid died in the fire. Sparks blew in the strong wind that night, and soon other houses began to catch fire. In nearby Thames Street, there were lots of things that could catch fire easily, such as oil, straw, tar, and coal. And here again it's showing how the wind blew the flames across the city. We know a lot about the Great Fire of London because several people wrote about it in their diaries. The most famous was Samuel Pepys, and there's a picture there showing Samuel Pepys, who wrote the diary. Okay, we've got another subheading here, Fighting the Great Fire. By 8 o'clock the next morning, 300 buildings had burned down. London Bridge had also caught fire. The Lord Mayor of London ordered people to pull down their houses, but many refused because they did not want their homes to be destroyed. Even where houses were pulled down, the fire jumped the gap. By Monday, many people had given up hope of the fire coming under control. They took their belongings across the River Thames in boats. Others used carts to take their possessions to the fields outside the city. Some people buried valuable things in the ground, and Samuel Pepys buried wine and Parmesan cheese in a hole in his garden. He sent all his money to a friend's house in Bethnal Green. And here is another subheading about saving some of the important buildings in London, so saving the Tower of London. On Tuesday the 4th of September, the fire had spread to the Navy officers near the Tower of London. Orders were sent to blow up buildings to save the Navy officers. This worked well. And you can see again this old map. There's St Paul's Cathedral is labelled, the Tower of London, and Pudding Lane, where the fire started in the first place. There was a big store of gunpowder in the Tower of London. This was used to blow up buildings to save the tower. That evening, the flames reached St Paul's Cathedral. Again, another famous building. By the early hours of the morning on Wednesday the 5th of September, St Paul's Cathedral was in flames. Stones began to explode with the heat. The lead on the roof melted and ran down the streets in streams. The fire was now getting closer to the Royal Palace in Whitehall. The Queen left for Hampton Court, but King Charles II stayed behind to help organise the firefighting. Later in the morning, the wind dropped and at last the fire began to die down. The fire lasted 4 days and 4 nights. 13,000 homes burnt down, as well as 80 churches. Nobody knows how many people died in the fire. It was probably about 6. So this shows before the fire, and the bottom picture shows London after the fire. 200,000 people now had no homes and very few possessions. People camped in fields or set up shelters near their old homes. Rebuilding the city was a huge job. Although many buildings were still standing, they were badly damaged and could not be repaired. Christopher Wren designed many new churches and a new St Paul's Cathedral. To prevent fires in the future, new buildings were made of brick or stone. There were no more upper floors jutting out, so they could almost touch the building on the opposite side of the street. So these new homes were built of brick. Rich people began to insure their homes against fire, and they paid money to insurance companies. The companies paid for a home to be rebuilt if it caught fire. They also paid men to put out the fires. The firemen wore uniforms and only helped those who were insured. Fire marks were put on walls so they knew who they could help. As well as the new system, more buckets, ladders and axes were kept at special places in the city. There were also better pumps.